Greetings everyone. Mike here again on my little Pro 4X Adventures Facebook page and YouTube channel. Just got through doing a little video on putting the lift kit on my Frontier, and I want to talk a little bit about what modifications I had to make to the fender wells to get clearance for those 33's. So my 33's are Cooper STT Pro. They're 285/70. They're not quite a 33. They're like a 32.8 or something like that. Anyway, they're close enough to a 33 for me. But when I first put them on, obviously I had rubbing issues in the rear. I had rubbing issues in the front that I had to take care of. So we're going to take a quick look at what I did to solve those issues. So in the rear, obviously the first thing I did was get rid of this mud flap. I took all the mud flaps off, all the splash guards off, and the little front spoiler in the front. With the mud flap on here, there was no way that I was going to get clearance with the mud flap, so it had to go. I'm not really a fan of the mud flap, so I was going to take them all off anyway, so I didn't really care. When you get the mud flap off, there's a little nub. It's kind of a square nub that sticks out about this far on this liner. So what I did is a quick melt mod to really basically just kind of cave that nub in to get clearance on these. I did have to cut a little metal. When you pull your fender liner out, this part of the fender kind of goes straight back and then angles. So from probably about right here, I just put a cutoff wheel on my grinder and cut a little triangular piece off of the fender right there to get clearance to be able to do this melt mod. Or I didn't have clearance. It wasn't a huge piece of metal. It was a little triangle piece, probably about this big, about that long, probably about that wide in the on the back side. Just kind of angle it off to give you a little bit of clearance to do this melt mod. Then I just hit it with some black Rust-Oleum just to cover up the bare metal. On this nub, what I did was get my heat gun out, started heating it up, got it soft. I got a fairly decent heat gun that's adjustable. I was using it pretty hot though. If you are using a heat gun on these fender liners, do kind of be a little cautious, because you can just completely melt these liners with those heat guns. So anyway, what I ended up doing was just heating up that nub, kind of the front of it and all four sides of it, until I got it nice and soft. And then I literally used that rock right there and just push that rock up against it, and then hit it with the hose to reset the plastic. And that held, and that got that nub far enough out of the way. I've seen guys that have just cut them off, but then of course it leaves a big hole there, and the melt mod worked fine. There is a little bit of a ridge right here in your fender. With mine, I did heat this ridge up a little bit and kind of remold this section of it. That's all I needed to do to make sure I had plenty of clearance in the back here. So that went pretty smooth. Got that nub out of the way. Like I said, I did have to cut a little bit of metal off of the fender. Just kind of angle, kind of from about right here, just kind of angle back to get a little clearance there. On the front, I was having the most rubbing probably on the front. I really didn't have any issues with any rubbing on the bumper here. It was a little more further in where it was rubbing on the fender liner. So what I ended up doing with this, I didn't have to do any melt mods on the fender liner in the front. I just redid the mounting of how it mounts to the bumper, and I'll show you what I did there. So on the bumper, originally this fender liner was on the bottom side of the bumper, and of course it had that splash guard on here, and all kind of sandwiched together. You can see the two screws here. If I can get my camera working here, got a screw here and a screw here. There are two little mounting pins are little mounting brackets on the fender liner, look similar to this, that I reused to relocate this fender liner. So what I ended up doing on my fender is, like, the fender used to come out about this far, so this kind of came out like that, and then there was a little hole here, and then there was another nub that stuck out here. Man, I'm not a good cameraman. And then there was another one out here. So what I ended up doing was just cutting this off here down to where that opening was, and then I cut that square piece. It kind of looked like this, and basically just cut those off, and there was 2 of them. And then I trimmed a little bit more of an angle here. Once I kind of started putting everything back together, I realized that my fender was still sticking out like this far, so I kind of trimmed this off. If you do it this way, you can kind of eyeball it when you get under here and kind of figure out what you need to trim off of this. On the fender liner, it also had a lot of excess plastic on the front side of those 2 brackets for these screws. So I just cut all that excess plastic off of the fender liner. Then I was able to just grab the fender liner and squeeze it to the bumper, and then I relocated the fender liner over the top of the bumper instead of under it, and then made a couple little pilot holes for these screws just to make them go in a little bit easier. Pulled that fender liner back up to the bumper, put the screws in, and that probably brought that fender liner forward probably close to 2 inches. If you look under here, you can see it's a little difficult to see. You have 1 screw here on your fender liner, and then you have the 2 screws underneath. Now, before I connected the stuff underneath, I went ahead and put this screw back in, so I knew that my fender liner was in place in the front, and then I pulled on it from underneath and pulled it back. That fender liner used to stick out almost flush with this. So making that change on how this is mounted to the bumper gave me plenty of clearance for the front wheel. Like I said, the tire wasn't making contact with the actual bumper here. It was more making contact with this part of the fender liner when it was still way out here. But that got that pulled back and out of the way. Let's step over to the other side here where the wheels turn the other way. You can kind of see what we got for clearance. So you can see now that I've got probably an inch and a half of clearance between that fender liner and the wheel once the wheels turned. So those few little mods, like I said, there's 1 little melt mod on the back side of the fender. Did have to take some metal off the back side of the fender. Just kind of cut that little lip off to give me room to do the melt mod. And then on the front end, I didn't have to do any melt mod. I just kind of relocated how the fender liner is attached to the bottom of the front bumper, and that gave me all the clearance I needed in the front. In the rear, obviously there was no clearance issues in the rear. I did pull the mud flap and the splash guard off the front of it. I didn't really want them on there anyway, so it wasn't a big deal, so I just took those off. So anyway, there you go. So if you're putting 33's on a Frontier and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do with clearance, that's how I solved my clearance issues. Like I said, it was just a melt mod on the back side of the fender well to get that nub pushed in. And like I said, I literally did it with that rock over there and just got it soft, pushed it in, hit it with the hose to reset the plastic, and it worked out great. And then just trying to change my mounting on the front end of the liner of how it mounts to the bumper, and it pulled that out, or pulled that forward probably, like I said, almost 2 inches, which gave me plenty of clearance on the front. So anyway, that's how I solved my clearance issues with 33's on my 2019 Frontier. So if you're doing these, hopefully this will give you some ideas of how to go about solving clearance issues without completely having to just cut up fender liners. I have seen guys just kind of cut them off. You can do that. Eventually I'll be replacing the front bumper on this one, and I'll be doing some other modifications to those fender liners. But as it sits now, I didn't really want to get rid of the fender liners. I do live up in Wisconsin, and we have to deal with a lot of snow and stuff in the winter, and having those liners in there kind of helps with some of that. So anyway, that's how I solve my clearance issues with 33s. So hopefully it helps everybody out, and we'll talk to you next time.